What do you call it when a car stops you in your tracks, makes you forget everything else on your mind? Oh yeah, the holy shit factor. We used to have it all over the car world. Bugatti Atlantique, Lamborghini Countach, even the Dodge Viper. Yes, it's been a while, but it may be returning, and from a rather unlikely source. Going to have to start today's episode with a bit of a disclaimer because I have to present an odd question to you guys. What makes car folks, maybe even non-car folks, say holy shit when looking at a car? I would argue it has nothing to do with technology and definitely nothing to do with the number of screens in any vehicle. Rather, it's a combination of design and details. And when I say details, more like old world details like you see in mechanical watches. And that's where we arrive at this, the Nilu 27. We will talk more about who Nilu is and what this car is trying to be later in the episode. But no, there is a lot of Bugatti, Lamborghini, and Koenigsegg in this vehicle. And when I say in this vehicle, I don't mean like they took inspiration from those vehicles. I mean people that worked on those vehicles worked on this car. That being the case, what's really the biggest holy shit factor outside of the design here? And now we're gonna nerd out to the tune of 1,070 horsepower. But like your algebra class back in the day, it's more important to show your work. And the work here, 6.5 liter V12. And the most important aspect about that work, no turbochargers and no electric motors. Now, huge asterisk there. This has yet to go through homologation in different municipalities around the world. So there may be a need to have an integrated starter generator motor like the 53 series over at Mercedes, where it replaces the starter motor and the accessory drive. They still haven't crossed that bridge yet, but it still stands. No turbo, no hybrid system. If you're a very small car manufacturer just starting up, do you think that you would have the budget to make your own engine, or would you farm that out? Answer, you would farm that out, in this case, to Hartley Engines in New Zealand. Now, you may know Hartley for making parts for performance like Toyota and Nissan engines, or doing upfits to blocks of Toyota and Nissan V8s, and being very successful in racing engines. So they've contracted with these guys to make a bespoke built engine. So this is not a block from anything else. It's a bespoke built block for this car. And what's fascinating here, yeah, this is kind of a roller, but they've already got a working prototype. It's a 4-cylinder, 2.2 liter, and this one is supposed to redline at like 11,000 RPM. That one redlines at 10,000 RPM, and out of a 2.24, 438 horsepower. Now that gets us to the transmission. And if you notice, the transmission sits behind the 12-cylinder engine, so you got the shifter there and this crazy long linkage to go back here, which is like funneled through the different aspects of the car. The transmission you have seen before, at least older versions of it. That same transmission, a 7-speed manual, you've seen it in Pagani's, Koenigsegg, as well as the Hennessy. This is a newer version of it. Okay, so we talked about the crazy power that comes out of that engine. This being a manual transmission, it brings up the question of, can it support that kind of torque with 3 pedals? That's what's fascinating about the folks at Cima. This transmission, whether it's in this car or some of the others I mentioned, this is rated up to 810 pounds of torque. And then there's that exhaust and the cats. This is just pure artwork. Now, there's a couple of things going on here. There's going to be 2 versions of this car. There's going to be like the OG, the non-homologated car, and then there's going to be the homologated car, basically the car that's going to be the road car. The discussion is this will be completely open in the OG, and then in the road car, potentially there might be a mesh over here. Now, that gets us into what this thing is made of. It's a carbon tub, but there's a couple of things, at least decisions they had within the company, and they really debated this. Do you do some sort of like carbon extension to the carbon tub, which would work and be very strong and give you control over the car because it would be stronger, right? Or do you do this tubular thing? And the idea here was, okay, it could be considered charming, old world, but in reality, it gave them the opportunity to showcase not just the engine, but get more cooling to the engine. At least that's what the CTO tells me. And if you just look at it, it's the kind of thing where you spend time back here and you just kind of need a moment with it. And so we've arrived at that point in our little telenovela here, where we have to understand what is Nilu and who are the folks behind it. What the company is, that's pretty straightforward. It's a new hypercar company. Who's behind it? That's the fascinating part of the story. And that is Sasha. He's the person behind it. I would try to pronounce his last name, but I promise you I will butcher it. Sasha, the whole story starts back in Georgia, and don't think like Atlanta or busiest airport in the world. Think more like Black Sea. He's a kid growing up there at a very challenging time, and his parents basically put it all together for him and sent him to Art Center College of Design. At the same time, he met a girl, was really into the girl, and they both basically went to California. And there he went through transport design, and his first job was with Volkswagen Group. So here he is, he's working in the Volkswagen Group, sketching Volkswagens, but of course, Sasha's the kind of guy that looks around, sees different opportunities, and he saw an opportunity to put a sketch in for what would become a 10-cylinder, mid-engined Italian sports car, the Huracan. Then he kind of does the work there, and then of course he's looking around the Volkswagen Group and like, well, if I work with the guys in Italy, why not these guys sitting over in France? So then he goes over to France and starts working on Bugattis. There he meets a guy by the name of Etienne who runs the interior design of Bugatti. Remember his name because he comes back into the story. Then he decides, you know, I'm working at these small boutique car manufacturers. Why don't I go to a big car company? So he went to the Hyundai Group and worked at Genesis. And there he learned really what happens with bigger budgets, but really the pitfalls of large car companies. So he took that and he decided, I want to go work for another crazy hypercar manufacturer. So he goes to Sweden and works with Christian von Koenigsegg. There he designs two cars, and it was at that point that he says, I've been working on a car since 2006. Why don't I make it my own car? So he calls that Etienne guy, the interior designer from Bugatti. Why don't you come work with me? And he designs the interior of this thing. And then he says, remember the girl that left Georgia with him? He says, why don't we start a car company together? And you've got all this marketing experience in the car business, so why don't you be like the boss of the company and I'll be the designer? And that is Nilu. As far as the 27 part, I'm going to leave that part of the story to be told by Sasha himself because he is a guest on our Motoman podcast. You can see that here. Now that we understand the history of how this came into being, I'm going to attempt to point out the design and architecture details that make this stand out over other recent and modern day hypercars. First stop would be the front. And this is the most unique aspect about it because this goes back to the original sketch of the car, which Sasha tells me came in 2006. And here it's not just, I want a big open face to get air to the back of the car or to have like active aero. This was more about hiding details that are mandated, but put them in a more unique packaging, right? For example, this will be the headlight here. Very unique light signature, but also it doesn't take up real estate in other clean parts of the design. Now, there's another unique aspect you don't really see in camera, but the nose. It extends over the splitter, but the splitter is wider than the nose from the plan view. It's a stunning detail that stands out and makes the car unique only when you see it in person. Then there's the ride height of the car. Now, yeah, that's more technical in architecture, but it goes to the design. And this one, we have to look at other cars. The Bugatti, for example, the Veyron at high speed mode, that's 60 mils off the ground. But then you go to the opposite end of the spectrum, say like a GT3, more pedestrian. That's 100 mils off the ground. This sits 84 mils off the ground. That works in conjunction with a carbon fiber tub. Now, this is both design as well as architecture. The seats are molded into the carbon fiber tub, so the idea is it lowers where you're putting the hip point of the passengers, and it lowers specifically by 25 mils, meaning the height of the vehicle. But then they go a step further, where instead of having a roof, there's this glass canopy. So this is both the roof and the door, which takes another 34 mils out of the height of this car. So it sits lower than most other hypercars, which changes there's a pageantry to this car because it's so short, but it's also so low, which makes it look, I'm gonna say, more organic, and it brings together all of these bits here, like these air channels. And then there's a little bit of history. I don't think Sasha really, we've talked about this, but to me, I'm looking at this, I'm thinking old-timey Countach. And so we arrive at an aspect of the Nilu 27 design that could legitimately be filed under the heading of automotive pornography. And I don't just say this as a Greek, I say this as a student of automotive design, because this is the view of the car that stands out. It stands out for both aesthetic reasons as well as technical reasons. Let's start with the technical reasons. You look at the exposed rear tire. You could say, oh my God, that's aesthetic. It looks incredibly sexy. However, you could look at that and also say, well, they're ripping off design ideas from Lola's from like the 60s. But in reality, that's taking the same theory that Lola used for their cars and applying it to this. And Bugatti Tourbillon, they did the same thing. You see, it's all about getting air around the car efficiently. And there's a couple of ways you do that. You get air over the car, and we talked about it being lower, but then you want to make the front of the car, meaning the frontal area that hits the air, as small as possible so there's less resistance. And then you want to run that air underneath the vehicle. That's why you have these diffusers. The diffusers not structure like the Bugatti Tourbillon, but still do the same function of creating downforce without having a wing that creates resistance. That brings us back to the rear tires, where you've channeled the air efficiently through all these different bits. Now you don't need a huge part of the body that would get in the way of channeling more air and releasing it from the vehicle. That's why it looks so stunning in the rear. But then there's a couple of other details that clean up the rear of the car, and it's separated almost like a 3-acts, 1, 2, and 3. Here's where the life of the car is. You have this biplane spoiler, and this is a function of channeling air, yes, but it showcases the exhaust from the rear. And then the taillights are showcased in, again, probably something that came from 60s era race cars in terms of it's more of an organic shape at the top of the taillights. But what they've done here is they've put in this pattern that you see these holes in the taillights. That's repeated in the shifter and other bits on the inside of the car. So a little bit behind the scenes, I've actually seen this car in person 3 times. The first time I saw it, it was white. And then the second time I saw it was in this beautiful red. And the third time is now, and this is the first time I'm sitting in the car. It is a completely different experience from this vantage point. Let's start from the front of the interior. That whole piece on the front, it's not a piece, it's actually structure to the car. Remember we talked about this like tubular thing in the back that shapes or really is the showcase for the engine. Same kind of thing here, and the vents, they come up over the structural piece. Then there's the IP, or what one would call an IP, but really isn't an IP. First and foremost, this kind of takes the theory of a small diameter steering wheel from like race cars, or if you look at like GT cars, they have smaller diameter steering wheels in Porsches. This is 315 mils across, And that presents a challenge in that if you have this really small steering wheel, you really can't see the IP, at least larger gauges, through the steering wheel. So what they've done is they've taken the gauges and put them outside the steering wheel. So you've got smaller gauges like the gas gauge, the oil pressure, that kind of stuff in the center. They're about this big. And then the most important, like the visual, like jewelry, the tachometer and the speedometer sit outside the diameter of the steering wheel. Now, if the unique placement of the gauges weren't enough, the way in which they're showcased, that's even more fascinating. This whole enclosure, if you could call it, this is an alloy that's been ceramic coated, and then it has all of this almost Greek architecture. I don't say this just because I'm Greek, but that's what it looks like, connecting everything together. And then this, kind of an inspiration from the Porsche 928, where it does have an adjustable wheel, so it goes up and down and in and out, and the actual IP moves with the wheel. Then there's the steering wheel. The steering wheel, it repeats the concept of a deep dish wheel, meaning on your car outside. And so it has these layers where everything is cross-drilled to give the perception and the reality of it being lower weight. And then the center, the horn button, repeats the design of the center lock. I mean, this kind of stuff is fascinating, where especially it's showcased with the cross stitch in red. Then there's the shifter. This, I don't even know where to begin. So they call this a 7-speed manual transmission, but of course you want to go into reverse, right? Well, there is a lockout for reverse. You have to literally take this like a toggle switch in an airplane and move it up, and then you put the shifter in reverse. Fascinating. Then there's the very basic concept of this being a gated shifter. But notice the gate sits above the console, and there's a reason for that. They want this to be a short throw gated shifter. But how do you do that? Well, the idea of like a Mazda Miata, think along those lines of the shifter of a Mazda Miata, almost perfect, but this is a hypercar, so you need to add a little bit more weight to it. So they do that by having this stepped up gated shifter, so it literally is shorter throws. Then they put in these bits of tungsten to add weight to the actual shifter itself, so it all works together to be a menagerie of weight in your shifting. Fascinating stuff. If that were not enough, there is a real key. Now, from what I understand from the folks behind Nilu, there is a pageantry in which they start the engine. Right now, it's up here with these, again, aviation-inspired toggle switches. This may move depending on what they're doing, so the key may go over here. So we're still all kind of going back and forth on some of these bits. Then the obvious question is, does it have a stereo? Yes and no. It's got a Bluetooth speaker over there and speakers behind the headrest. There may be speaker placement depending on where it goes in the final car. We'll get to that. And then, of course, there's the seat. It is carved out of a carbon tub, so it doesn't move. However, the pedals move, as well as the seat back. The only screen I see so far is the rear view mirror is a camera, and then there's some discussion about putting like a trip computer here, obviously for mandates of different municipalities around the world. With that, I think I need some time alone in here. And now for something completely different, the most obvious question, how much? There's going to be two versions. There's going to be a road car, and there's going to be the OG, the non-homologated car. The road car, or put another way, the entry-level car, 2.8 million euro. In US dollars, that is 3.25 million. Then we get into that OG. That one is more expensive at 3.7 million euro, US dollars 4.3. Now they're going to make 54 of the road-going cars and 15 of the OG. Now this is where we get into, are we talking about vaporware, or are we talking about a company that will see the light of day? Now, many of you that have watched this show for many years know that I spent half of my career in the tech world doing tech startups. So I kind of have experience with what are the aspects that lead to success. Like, I don't have a crystal ball here that I could say, oh yeah, this is definitely going to be a successful company. But I feel like it has a better than 50% chance of success, and here's why. The most obvious is Sasha and Ina. Now, both have a lot of experience, yes, but what's fascinating about Sasha and different from any other car designer I have ever met in my life, he has an unusual amount of experience to build this very thing. He's done this at 3 other major hypercar companies. I don't know of any other car designers that have done that. Ina has experience working inside of car companies on the business side. And that's where it leads to the second aspect that will lead, I think, to success. And that is, yes, Sasha is a designer. Designers, historically, not good business people. But Sasha is smart enough to know where his abilities end and where he needs to seek other people. And that's where we get into the third aspect that will lead to success. Where are the cars going to be built? They're going to be built in Lars, Germany. Now, it doesn't sound like much, right? It's 30 miles from where Bugatti makes cars. So it's just outside of Strasbourg. But more importantly, it's in this almost like Silicon Valley of car building in southern Germany. So you've got all of this network of suppliers and, more importantly, talent in that area that Sasha and Ina can tap into. Now, again, will this guarantee success? I don't know. Now, I'm going to throw in like a bonus round that leads to success, and it has to do with when you design cars. Notice this isn't a show car. Yeah, it's like a roller. It's an advanced, like what a prototype would look like. But notice it doesn't have weird proportions. It looks like a road-going car. And that's one of the secrets of Sasha's success. Rather than me try to explain it to you, I can't because I'm not a car designer. I'll let him do it in his own words.
And I realized very early in my career that picking a sketch is folly. Like when you pick a sketch, you're picking something that is 0.1% of the way to a final product. So 99.99% is still left to do. And picking a sketch is a disservice to everyone involved because that sketch may not translate. And there's been plenty of instances when sketches don't translate. And then they translate into a butchered cart. Nobody's happy with it. Every presentation is a pain. Nobody walks away excited. It's all because the sketch that was picked perhaps wasn't the right sketch.
Yeah.
But at the sketch phase, it's very difficult to know what kind of stones are under that water, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I decided very early in my career, still in Volkswagen times, to stop showing sketches to anyone. I had a very distinctive sketch style and people really liked my drawings. Mm-hmm. But I realized it's not fair. I'm not getting what I want out of this process. So instead of showing sketches, I started building them in CAD, in 3D.
So this goes back to the gift of clarity.
Gift of clarity, and show directly the exterior as it will be in production. For sure, not every issue is solved, not every feasibility problem is solved, but at least it's on package. At least
but
you're
putting like the right size wheels on, you're putting
right
mirrors
wheels,
on the car. The packaging is all right, so the engineers
You also cheat. You cheat. But you cheat knowing where you cheated, and you know that you can rewind on those cheating points.
Like, so, what's a cheat you can get away with?
For example, you keep the tire OD always, never scale the tire OD up, but go half an inch larger on the rims, and scale the wheel arches by a few millimeters down, so you have tighter fitment of the wheel to the body. So you do these sorts of little tweaks here and there, which, by the way, later you can fight for.
Okay, so that's the man himself. If you want to learn more about his story, his career, and the cars he helped bring to life, you can see our full Motoman podcast episode with Sasha here. But now, this is the point of the episode. I say, I am just one man, and I'm going to turn this around to you guys. This case, I'm going to do it for a different reason. I may have a blind spot here. I personally sat my butt in that car and all of a sudden got very excited about it. So I may be looking at this through rose-colored glasses. I don't think I am. And that's why I'm going to ask you guys to do a SWOT analysis as to what do you see the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of Nilu as a business as well as a hypercar. Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotomanTV all word, MotomanTV all word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, until I see you in the next episode, bis später.